The 1960s and 1970s were a time of development and progression in America. The country was rebuilding from the Great Depression and World War II. Consumerism was taking over society, and people started to assemble in large protests advocating for change. This time also marked a major shift in the environmentalist movement. People adjusted their priorities from focusing mainly on preservation of resources to acknowledging broader environmental problems, respecting nature's beauty as it is, and understanding the relationship between society and the environment. People started to become more radical while advocating for change and protested immensely in the mid to late 20th century. After Rachel Carson published her book, Silent Spring, there was an immediate call for action, and the outcry from the public regarding the use of DDT eventually led to its ban in 1972. Environmental advocate groups such as the Sierra Club began to fight government on projects that would destroy unique places. They can be credited for saving the Grand Canyon from facing the same fate that Glen Canyon so devastatingly suffered. Organizations like the National Wildlife Federation began to rise up, and people such as Edward Abbey became the leading voice in this imperative movement. Ed Abbey was an iconic writer, radical environmentalist, and advocate for the West who helped spark an environmental movement that is still prevalent in today's society and has had a great impact on our country as a whole. Abbey was born in 1927 in Indiana and was the eldest of 5 children. His family suffered much from the Great Depression, moving from place to place while his father searched for work. When they finally settled in a small farmhouse in 1941, Abbey was introduced to nature and his love for the outdoors was born. Abbey began to write in journals at a young age and quickly became a skilled writer and developed a creative mind. This later propelled him towards a writing career, allowing him to become one of the most influential environmentalists of the late 20th century. His perspective was greatly broadened when he took a summer trip hitchhiking across the country, passing through Seattle, Yellowstone National Park, San Francisco, and eventually arriving in the Southwest Desert. Abbey developed a great love for the western deserts, and it held a special place in his heart for the rest of his life. When Abbey arrived home, he wrote about his journey and his deep respect and amazement of the canyon country. He would return many years later, working as a ranger in Arches National Park, writing about his experiences, which would later be turned into a book that transformed America's thoughts on the canyon country and supported an environmentalist revolution. Desert Solitaire is a Bible of the American West, a must-read for all environmentalists and one of the most enduring contemporary nature books of American literature. Abbey tackles the evils of industrial tourism and the importance of protecting and exploring places like Arches without letting it be exposed to mass amounts of people and automobiles. He does this while documenting his experience of living in isolation in Arches while working as a park ranger for 3 seasons. He wrote about spending his days exploring the unique canyons that extended for miles and miles across the land, describing the rock and arches in fine detail, praising the landscape without writing that it is, quote, the most beautiful place on earth, end quote. He illustrates the various organisms living in the harsh environment, characterizing the different flora and fauna, and voicing his concerns about organizations endangering many desert animals. He includes accounts of various adventures, such as spending a week in Havasu, exploring the maze and arches, searching for a dead tourist, and rafting the astonishing Glen Canyon that is now covered by Lake Powell. At the end of his book, Abbey discusses how people are destroying the environment because of greed and ignorance. He even attacks some of the National Park Service policies, saying that they are not considering the environmental impacts. Possibly one of the largest oppositions that Abbey establishes in his book is the development of roads in national parks. He believes that people can't, quote, see anything from a car. You've got to get out of the goddamn contraption and walk, better yet crawl, on hands and knees over the sandstone and through the thorn bush and cactus. When traces of blood begin to mark your trail, you'll see something. Maybe, end quote. Abbey takes an account of his time working in Arches and turns it into one of the most significant books defending the last untouched land of the American wilderness. Desert Solitaire is a unique book that had a profound impact on the environmentalist movement. Although it was not a huge success right away, the public eventually began to notice the raw power that the book promoted, becoming a weapon to fight industrialism and advocate for the West. It opened the public's eyes to the separation that was developing between humans and nature and highlighted the solitude of wilderness. Abbey gained a network of followers throughout the 1970s, and a radical environmental organization called Earth First was even inspired by Abbey and his ideas. Edward Abbey died in 1989 from health issues, but his powerful voice was never silenced. Today, President Trump has cut Bears Ears National Monument and Escalante Staircase National Monument nearly in half. But within hours of this executive order, countless organizations took a page from Abbey's book and filed a suit. Desert Solitaire will live on always, fighting the tyranny of industrialism and with it, promoting the complete importance of untouched wilderness.